What's happening, guys? Cooper Carter here for G66, and on this week's Fractal Friday, I want to share with you a very simple trick that can add a more vintage flavor, or some might say a more organic feel, to your effects. We live in a golden era of sound design. Unbelievably powerful digital units like the Axe-Fx3, the FM3, and the FM9 give us an incredible array of razor-sharp digital tools to shape tone with unheard of levels of precision. What that means is that a lot of the times it can be tempting to lock everything in as precisely as possible because we do have so much granular control. Now, it surprises people sometimes to hear that given what I do for a living and how much time I spend with these units dialing in sounds to exacting levels of detail, that I like to approach things from kind of a more traditional vintage standpoint, which means that a lot of the times I like to use tricks to make these razor-sharp digital sounds more organic or more analog. So here's a fun trick that once I've shown you is going to seem incredibly simple and hilariously obvious, but that I have used on so many of my own presets and that I have used on countless presets for Fractals artists as well. Now, of course, as always, this is just one short video, but if you guys want to get the absolute most out of your Fractal audio unit, whether that's the Axe-Fx3, the FM9, or the FM3, make sure to visit classes.coopercarter.com for my complete Fractal Audio Masterclass series. One of the most useful features of any Fractal unit is the ability to tie the rate of any given effect, so for example, this pan or tremolo, to the preset's tempo, and then change that tempo and have the effects change their rate dynamically. So this holds for the rotary that's connected to the tempo. It holds true for this delay as well. The time changes as I tap. This can be a way to really dial in effects to line up perfectly with the tempo of a song, which of course can be very useful in a live environment if you're using a tap tempo, but also can be really useful if you're not using tap tempo to align more modern or pronounced effects, like for example, Boulevard of Broken Dreams. So for pronounced effects like that, or for some forms of more modern music like metal or pop, tying things very exactly to the tempo can be very useful. But sometimes this level of exactitude can actually end up sounding sterile. I've double tracked a part here using this tremolo, and both of the tremolos are set to be an eighth note at 120, so 4 Hertz. So let's kick over to Reaper here. And when I play this back, you can hear that the part sounds fine. Everything's lining up and it sounds very precise. Now, of course, in the physical analog world, the tremolo on an amp, for example, can't be dialed in based off the tempo of your song. You have to do it by ear. And as I so often encourage, it's often better to use your ears and not your eyes. But why not combine the exact nature of the Axe-Fx with a more traditional approach? So our tempo here at an eighth note gives us 4 Hertz. So knowing that we're at 4 Hertz, let's just fudge this a little bit down to say, 3.8 for the left side of our track, and then bump it up to, let's say, 4.2 for the right side of our track, and listen to what that gives us. A much broader, much more interesting sound that doesn't sound quite so exact and sterile. And for this kind of tone and this kind of song, where we don't really want the tremolo to be as pronounced or staccato of an effect as you would for something like, for example, the Boulevard of Broken Dreams intro, this can give us a much more organic feel to the whole track. The same thing holds true for the rotary. In the real world, with an actual Leslie cabinet, you don't have the ability to tie a Leslie to the tempo. So right here we have a quarter note at 120 beats per minute, which is 2 Hertz. So knowing that it's 2 Hertz now, let's just change the value to something close to 2 Hertz so that as we play, we're not perfectly lining up the swirls of the Leslie with that tempo. Instead, we're kind of floating around the tempo in a more organic way. Over time, throughout the course of a part, not perfectly lining up with the tempo on each downbeat and coming back around can really add depth and, for lack of a better term, vibe to your part. And of course, we could do this with our delay as well for a lead. So we have a dotted eighth note at 120, and the FM9 is telling us that that's 375 milliseconds. So let's go ahead and select none for the tempo, and then just say somewhere around 375. Let's say, 371. And now we're slightly off tempo for a bit more of an organic feel. And if this were a stereo delay, so let's, for example, pick the digital stereo, instead of setting a time that's a little bit different, one alternate method can be to set the time that you want. So let's say a dotted eighth note. And then as you adjust the left-right time ratio, you might be tempted to, for example, pick a perfect 50%. But instead, you could, for example, pick 53%. So you get a little bit of kick back and forth between the two channels. That's not perfectly in time. Again, these little, quote, errors in your time add a more organic feel. I always love finding little places where we can use the exact nature of digital technology to find out what the, quote, right thing is, and then just introduce a little bit of old school analog uncertainty to it to add something extra to the track. We don't want it to be too perfect. After all, many of the most coveted things about any given medium are its little idiosyncrasies. The reason that we love tube amps so much is because they are imperfect beasts. And the reason that Fractal is the gold standard in the industry is because the algorithms are capable of reproducing all these little odd things that happen in vacuum tubes. So the next time you're dialing in an effect to align with the tempo, consider checking out what the tempo, quote, should be, and then simply changing it to be just a little bit different. So there you have it. Again, very simple, but the effect it can have on the feel of your parts is profound. I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, please do make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to G66's channel, and leave me a comment in the comment section below letting me know what you'd like to see on a future Fractal Friday. And as always, if you guys want to get the absolute most out of your Fractal audio unit, whether that's an AXFX3, an FM9, or an FM3, make sure to visit classes.coopercarter.com for my complete Fractal Audio Masterclass series. For all things Fractal Audio, keep it right here on G66, and I will see you guys next week on Fractal Friday.